Good afternoon, my conscious co-creators. Welcome to another edition of the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. Very pleased that you are all here with me today. I hope you're having a good day. It's a little foggy, a little misty here in New York City, and I know a lot of the country is in a big cold blast at the moment. But we've got a warm show in store for you. Should be a lot of fun with a guest with a great name. And I'll introduce him in just a moment. But first, of course, we have my blog post from a couple of years ago. I think this one's kind of pretty apropos for what we're going to talk about today. And the title of this blog post is We Are Deeply Connected to Everything Around Us. The illusion of separation runs deep in our culture. Most of us are so disconnected to the world around us. It can be easy to feel that what happens in another country does not affect us, or how the rain falls in Nairobi makes no difference in our life. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. For the universe is so deeply connected that even the smallest particle in the farthest reaches of space can affect our existence on this planet. It can be easy to dismiss this idea as pure fantasy. Indeed, many people do so. Yet science continues to bear out that this sense of separation is indeed the illusion. Even the recent events on our planet have shown us that one person's health can affect the health of an entire population. Indeed, even the environmental challenges we face show us that what we do in one place affects the whole world. The recent discoveries of minute amounts of plastic in all our food tells us a similar story. We cannot escape the fact that how we treat this world affects everyone who lives in it. And as we treat ourselves with either respect or disrespect, so too do we treat others the same. We are connected not only in a very real physical sense, but in an energetic or spiritual one as well. When our energy is low or we feel down, we affect the people around us as well. If we are inspired, motivated, and we show up with a ton of life force to contribute to the world, our families and our colleagues feel that as well. The ripple we are in the pond of the universe surely spreads out to touch everyone and everything. What we really need to consider, once we admit this to ourselves, is what kind of world do we want to live in? For when we put more love, more compassion, more forgiveness, and more kindness out into the world, it reverberates on for centuries. When we show others harshness, cruelty, judgment, and betrayal, it does the same thing. If we want to create a better world for ourselves and those we care about, we have to be the ones who start to create it. And we can create it. For we are not alone, and our connection to everything else means that we are creators of our world. As one little change in a fractal picture changes the entire image, so too our seemingly small contributions change the entire universe. So, do you consider yourself separate and disconnected from the world around you? What energy do you wish to contribute to the universe? So, I wrote this a couple of years ago, and I guess I was just feeling this sense of how much people really feel disconnected disconnected to nature, disconnected to each other, disconnected to all different aspects of the world. And when I hear people who kind of discount the effect that human beings have on the environment, it really kind of hurts a bit. Because when you go to a beautiful place and garbage is washing up on the shores of that beach, or you start hearing about how plastics are in everything around us, the food, the water, the soil, and you start to really feel how much our impact on the environment around us has. You, I cannot, I'll speak for myself. I cannot help but really feel this deep connection to everything that's all around us. And I see it in even little ways. I'm sure here everyone's had the experience of going to a gathering, a party, something, and if a couple of people are not in a good mood, you can tell it affects everyone else there. But if there are people just the opposite who are lively and energetic and they're just like full of spirit, that affects everyone else as well. The thing is that we tend to think our effect is only immediate, that we only affect what's right in front of us, who's right in front of us. And we kind of neglect the fact that we're electromagnetic beings. We um, emanate an electromagnetic field from our body that extends out much further than we think. And that the words we say, the actions we take, the energy we put out in the world, it doesn't just affect those in our immediate surrounding. It is literally like the pebble dropping in the still water, and those ripples go out further and further and further. Yes, it may get more subtle the further out it goes. But just because something is subtle does not mean it does not have an effect. Indeed, the whole art and science of astrology is all about that. It's all about how the subtle energies of planets and stars that are millions of miles and billions of miles away from us still affect us from the time we are born. And I know some people may discount that, and that's okay. Your reality and my reality may be very different, but I've experienced too much. I've seen too much. I've been educated on too many different things that I can see the truth of it. We used to have a wonderful show on the network many years ago called Living Consciously by this amazing astrologer, Monty Taylor, who did his show not just around teaching people astrology, but talking about the archetypes behind it, the ancient Greek and Roman myths behind the names of the planets and the constellations and what it means and the characteristics. And he really showed the depth and the flavor and the intricacy with which astrology relates its particular wisdom. And so it gave me a very deep and rich appreciation for it. And not just astrology. I mean, there's so many different systems. There's human design and engram and all kinds of stuff. So it's really coming to the understanding and coming to the feeling, like not just the understanding in the mind, but to get cultivate that feeling in the body of how interconnected we are. Well, one of my teachers who comes from a small village in Peru, he would say, when I've gone to teachings with him, he'd say, here in the West, people look at everything and so separate and so different. He says, the way I was brought up, we see the energy and the interconnection to everyone on the subtle field. The way we are in the West and the way we're brought up, it's one worldview. It's one particular point of view, and there are many cultures out there that see things very differently. And maybe if we can humble ourselves and admit that maybe we just don't know everything, and we become seekers of the truth of what's out there, that maybe we can learn a little bit more. Maybe we can l- see the connection where maybe in the past we only saw disconnection. And that connection, it's true no matter what we're putting out, no matter what we're experiencing. And so, what really comes down to us and our power is what kind of effect do we want to have on the world? What kind of contribution do we want to have in this life? Do we want it to be one where we're uplifting and empowering each other and supporting each other? Or is it one where we're just trying to get ahead and we don't care who we're climbing on top of and we don't care the pain that we cause? What kind of world do you want to live in? Things are changing so rapidly all around us. It can feel sometimes like we're in the middle of this gigantic storm and we don't know which way is up. Guess what? We get to decide which way is up. We get to decide through our own individual actions, through our own perspectives, through our own thoughts and feelings and actions. Do you want to live in a more compassionate world? How can you show up more compassionately? Do you want to live in a more supportive world? How can you show up more supportively? Really, ultimately, it comes down to what do we want to create in this life? And how we show up and what we do, that ripples forward beyond our imagination. So that's my blog post. It's entitled, We Are Deeply Connected to Everything Around Us. You can always find it on my personal website, theconsciousconsultant.com. And of course, at talkradio.nyc/blog. Hope you enjoyed it. And don't forget, if you like my blogs, you might like my book, Everyday Awakening, which you can find wherever books are sold. All right. It is now my extreme pleasure to welcome to the show entrepreneur, author, speaker, founder, Sam Kabert.
Hey Sam, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the intro and looking forward to seeing where this discussion's going to take us.
Yeah, Sam, me too. So just to give the audience, before we go to break, a little bit more information about you, Sam, the other Sam, well, also this Sam, but is a successful serial entrepreneur turned spiritual seeker and keynote speaker. He is known for his ability to put together teams to execute his vision. He is the author of the #1 best-selling book, Soul Life Balance, a guide to igniting and integrating spiritual awakenings. He's the founder of SwagWorx and Clone Yourself University. Ooh, have you cloned yourself? Really? And host of the Soul Seeker podcast. Despite all Sam's ventures and business success and being recognized as one of Silicon Valley's 40 under 40 at just age 31 and rising star in the promotional products industry, he soon recognized that something was missing. Sam realized that despite his success, he was unhappy. This understanding catapulted him on his most recent exploration of his life's purpose. He's on a mission to bridge the gap between the way we conduct ourselves in business, mindful practices, how we communicate with everyone, especially oneself, all through prioritizing psychological safety and mental health. Welcome to the Conscious Consultant Hour, my fellow Sam.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, Sam, I took a little longer with my blog post than I thought I would. We got to go out to our first break. When we come back, let's start off with sort of how did you get to go from being an entrepreneur and a 40 under 40 guy in Silicon Valley to being a spiritual seeker? Okay.
Yeah, sounds great.
Awesome. So everyone, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We do this every Thursday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on talkradio.nyc. And we'll be right back with our guest, Sam Kabert, in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We're speaking this hour with Sam Kabert, author of the book Soul Life Balance. So, Sam, first, what got you motivated to be an entrepreneur in the first place?
Oh, it's in my blood. My parents and their parents pretty much just kind of happened. That's a definitely a story there. Just how I started my business in college, and I just kept going from there. And I think reflecting back on it too, I had gotten a DUI when I was 23 or something like that, and it was 4th of July in South Lake Tahoe. I live in California, and I remember coming back to like the campsite in the morning, and there are some people there. There's like 40 of us, so some friends of friends, if you will, and
Mhm.
someone going like, "Welcome to the club." And I remember hearing like, "Welcome to the club," and kind of like joking about it and being like, "I don't want to be in your club." I was already like demoralized. So that really was like the chip on my shoulder that led to the next events of the synchronicities there that led me to starting that business.
Okay. Okay. So you got into kind of being a serial entrepreneur. You started a one business and then other things. Um, what kind of brought you to that point where you realized you wanted something more than what you had? Because you were pretty successful, right? You were being
Yeah.
recognized as a pretty successful entrepreneur at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was achieving my goals. I think in a lot of ways, there's influencer, what's his name? It's escaping me right now. I think it's Steve Weatherford. He was a kicker or punter for the New York Giants. And I remember him talking about winning the Super Bowl and then being like, oh, there's got to be something more. And that was exactly how it felt for me. It was like I was chasing these goals. And once I had gotten to this place of peaking at my version of my Mount Everest, it was like, wait, I still am not feeling any different. I'm still like numb inside, right? It was a numbing depression. Then through doing the work the past 6 years or so, now I know so clearly that on a subconscious level, I was saying to myself, when I achieve ABC, I will feel XYZ. So it was really this, we could call it chasing of success, pursuing success, whatever you want to call it. But now I reframe that to the yogic philosophy of sadhana. And when I was going through my yoga teacher training, our instructor said to name your ultimate potential is to limit your ultimate potential. And that's when it really hit me, being like, oh, wow, I've been chasing these goals and I named it as my ultimate potential and focused on the end destination. Because I was so entrenched in personal development, where now I think of it as soul or spiritual development. And now I prioritize the journey and, the daily spiritual practices and just mental and emotional health practices that are going to fill me up on a daily basis versus like chasing this end destination.
Mm. And I mean, was there like a particular moment, like that moment when you achieved something where it was just like, huh, this is it? Or was it more something kind of gradual, like you achieve something, you're like, oh, that's okay, but not so good, and then something else, and it just kind of built over time? Or was it more something like it just suddenly hit you and then it was like, okay, that's it. No, I gotta do something else.
Yeah, I mean, these synchronicities led me to my first ayahuasca ceremony, and then from there, I did a mushroom ceremony for healing after that, and that was all a gradual progression. But in
Mhm.
that mushroom ceremony, that's when it hit me, being like, "Oh my God! Like I cracked the code! Like I won the game! Like I'm,
Ah.
whoa!" And then that's when I was able to start to like defragment, if you will, and start to really be like, whoa, this isn't actually what I ever really wanted. And
Mm.
so if there was a moment, it would have been in the mushroom ceremony as opposed to everything that led up to that.
Gotcha. Um, and so you said the number of synchronicities led to you like getting involved in psychedelics using ayahuasca and psilocybin. Were they like big synchronicities? Were they little things?
Well, back then I didn't have it in my vocabulary to know the word. I was at just such a rock bottom that it was just so obvious. And I was at this place of ultimate surrender. And, uh, ayahuasca had came into my field the year before when I started to microdose with psilocybin. And I remember a friend coming into my life, kind of like in the movie Limitless with Bradley
Yeah.
Cooper.
Yeah.
And obviously, microdosing doesn't have the detrimental effects as we see in that film. If any of you listening have seen it, but that said, this person came into my life very synchronistically, and
Mhm.
it was interesting. And then I started microdosing. He told me about ayahuasca, and I was like, ayahuasca, and there was something in me that was like, okay, good to know that that's out there. I feel like I'll do that one day, but that scares the heck out of me. So,
Mm.
not for now. And then it's probably like 6, 9 months later, it came back into my field through a friend who, that's another story. So I can get into it, but this friend had an experience. And then I watched her progression and we went out to dinner to talk about her experience. And I remember at the dinner table, me being like, what's their contact information? I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so you go to this ceremony, you try ayahuasca, you do a macro dose of psilocybin, you have this big realization, you see yourself differently. But like just having that in a ceremony is not going to change your life, right? What happened afterwards? Like, how did you take that experience and really integrate it into your life to make the change to live more authentically for yourself?
Yeah, I think for me, and I've seen this now, being on the other side, being an integration coach and all that. I think for me, having the background of being like an action taker and being like, oh, all right, I understand this thing, integration. Like I go from doing to being, but I have to do the things to get to being, so I can do these things to get to the being. So I took it serious and dove head in. The first, this was 2019. The first 6 months were very disorienting. It was very
Mhm.
challenging because I didn't have community. All I had was the community from the ceremony, the two ceremonies I had done, and I couldn't relate to my current friends and family. So that was challenging, or even my, like, we could call him my spiritual mentor. And then in January of 2020, I joined Aubrey Marcus's mastermind called Fit for Service. And being in that like mastermind fellowship, which was all about like spiritual and soul development, was the game changer, especially when the lockdowns happened the next 2 months, because I was entrenched in this community. And I ended up being in that community for 2 years. For the next, from 2020 to like 2022, I traveled more than I ever had in my life when most people weren't going
Yeah.
out. I was like
Yeah.
always traveling. I was barely ever home for a month straight, just being with the community in different kinds of ways. And I started to do my own trainings and certification programs as well. So that growth just happened so fast because I invested in myself, putting myself out there in community versus just trying to figure it out on my own.
Gotcha. And what kinds of places were you traveling to at that time?
A lot of medicine ceremonies, like toad
Okay.
medicine is one, the summits for our events. So, I mean, being in California, I've spent a lot of time in Malibu, surprise, surprise, with
Mhm.
the medicine community down there. For the summits, everywhere from, Austin, Texas to Costa Rica. I've spent 2 months in Costa Rica in 2021 at different times. So just all over the place. Arizona, all over.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, so you've done all this work, you're taking the action, you found community. What got you to the place of deciding like I need to write a book about this?
Oh, well, that came through in the ayahuasca ceremony, the first night of
Ah.
doing ayahuasca, this idea of soul life balance as opposed to work life balance. But in
Hmm.
2020, when everyone was writing their books, and that the doer in me was like, oh, I gotta write my book. I just wrote my first three books in less than a year. Like, I gotta write. And then I heard this voice just like, no, now it's time to like sit and be like, you gotta figure it out. So it took me 3 years of just like really exploring, what does soul life balance mean? How can I embody that? Then other synchronicities led to it being like, oh, wow, now it's time to write the book. So then that's when I was like, all right, now I'm gonna write it.
Interesting. So you sort of took advantage of the lockdown and of that time to really just be present to what was percolating underneath. And then sort of I guess when the water boiled or when you felt the 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 things matured inside of you, then you started to take pen to paper, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, cool. All right, let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, let's talk about um, what the basic principles are in your book, Soul Life Balance, and how do we integrate spiritual awakenings into our daily life? Because sometimes that can be pretty challenging, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I've met many people who've like had Kundalini awakenings and they were destabilized for many months. So we'll get into that in just a moment. Everyone, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We're speaking this hour with Sam Kabert, and we'll be right back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marsanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. So Sam, you obviously, from your experiences, from all the things that happened, you had an awakening. And your book, you talk about how to integrate spiritual awakening. So what was that process like for you? How did you learn to start to take these things you were experiencing and really apply them to your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, that just goes back to everything we discussed before, joining the communities and engrossing myself into all of these different educational resources, cutting out the things that weren't serving me, and just diving deeper into it, to all the work. And one thing I noticed in myself, which I'm very passionate about sharing now for people newly on the path, is like, if you're approaching like quote unquote doing the work or your spiritual practices as a doing, then it's probably not going to serve you, because a lot of people, when they're new on the path, they approach it like a to-do list. Like, okay, I did my meditation in the morning, then I did my breath work, my cold plunge, my apple cider vinegar water, I journaled about the experience, check, right? And that can serve you in terms of like checking out how these different things are going to feel for you, and you start to intuitively understand when you can call upon them. But if you're just approaching it as like check, then you're just still trapped in that cycle of doing, and it's really about getting to the being.
And what would you say supported you most? I mean, I understand community, these different practices, but for you personally, like, what supported you most in actually being different?
Yeah, I mean, I had to try a lot of different things, right? To be like, okay, that's kind of my point here. It'd be like, all right, I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to do some breath work, then I'm going to meditate, then I'm talking about myself here, and then I'm going to journal, do all these things. And then it's like, what the heck am I doing here? And then that's kind of when that light bulb went off, being like, oh, now's a good time for me to journal, to unpack this thing and to activate my intuition, connect with my higher self, because that's what happens when you journal. Oh, now's the time for me to regulate my nervous system through breath work because I'm feeling anxiety. Oh, I have so many racing thoughts. Maybe I should just meditate. And if I do a little bit of breath work first, that's going to help me get to the meditative state first. Oh, got it. Now this is clicking. Things like that. Or, man, I need a reset. So I'm going to go to the gym and do a hot cold therapy until I sweat it all out and I surrender to that cold. Or like, man, my body needs some movement. Okay, it's time for me to get in a yoga class. Like, I probably went to yoga classes almost twice a day for a period of time, and almost every day. And then when I became a yoga instructor, I couldn't go to yoga classes anymore for whatever reason. And then I got into Hot 26 versus flow. And then it took like the spiritual element out, but it felt so good in my body. And then I started to, lift weights again and be like, whoa, now it feels so much different being in my body lifting weights versus the first 20 years of my life lifting weights, because because now I'm not disassociated from my body. So it's
Right.
really just trying these different things and seeing like, hey, what fits and what's going to land, what's going to stick. And then obviously educational wise, like documentaries or books, and my podcast that I launched in 2019, talking with other people. It's, and in the community, it's really, I say community, and I know that can be kind of just like a throwaway thing, but like this is where those things are starting to get exposed to you. You're sharing links of different books or
Right.
documentaries, or hey, did you try this? Right. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. Cool. So it's really, to me, what I'm hearing underneath it all is it's really a practice of presence, right? It's sort of like you're present to what are you feeling in the moment? What does the body want? What does the nervous system want? And then that sort of gives you the breadcrumbs of like, okay, this is what's present for me, so let me engage in this activity, which then supports what I'm being present to, but not being so attached to it like it's a routine, like you have to do this because the next day you might be present to something different. And so now you engage in something different.
Yeah, I mean, even right now, like I've done breath work every single morning for, I don't know, maybe the past 2 months, except for like maybe 3 or 4 times, and
Mhm,
it's like those times when I'm like, oh, I wake up, first thing I do is breath work. And it's like, you know what? Not today. I know I need it, but
mhm.
not today. So yeah, it's definitely about presence for me. Presence and being are one of the same, just different words to
Mhm,
describe it,
mhm.
but 100%.
So since you started on this path of beingness, what kinds of challenges have you had that are like different than the challenges you had before?
All kinds. I mean, in 2023, my life totally imploded. I thought
Mm.
I had it all figured out once again in a different kind of way, because the in February 22nd, 2022, I published Soul Life Balance, and
Mhm.
then I got into speaking, and everything just kind of clicked and took off from there. Then I got into a relationship, and then the following year, early February of 2023, that relationship imploded, and that was super messy, and
Mhm.
it ended with a beautiful baby being born that I didn't meet till just about a month ago, and he's 15 months
Oh,
old. So, I mean, that kind of right there gives you an idea of like the implosion that happened.
yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like February is a very active month for you out of the year.
Even 2019, it all started in February, March. Yeah, it's
Ah,
like this February, March time. But fortunately, this February, at least, well, I guess meeting my baby boy now, it's still kind of that time. So it is fascinating for sure.
beautiful, beautiful. So, I mean, if someone's listening to this show and they're like, I'm unhappy in my life, I need to change things, I need to do something different, what would you recommend to them? Like, how should someone even just to get started to want to be different, do different, be different in their life from the way they've been before?
Yeah, if that's where you're at, I invite you to join my free online community. It's called the Breath Club, and that's a great place to start because I'm leading breath work every single week. I'm teaching you about the nervous system. There's a whole host of pre-recorded exercises. And for me, with all the different plant and earth medicine ceremonies I've done, all the people I've supported pre and post integration, what's been most impactful for not only myself, but the people that I work with is learning the nervous system so that
Mm.
you can do breath work to regulate your nervous system, and then the subconscious mind, how to work with your subconscious mind. The two pair well together. So, so great. So that's what I'm teaching. And my new book that I published last year called Overcome the Overwhelm, there's a 6-step breath process to access peace. And it's basically founded on this whole idea of that science teaches us that our body processes emotions in 90 seconds. We literally have a
Oh.
physiological response when we experience an emotion. Emotions are
Mhm.
energy in motion, yet we get caught in that triggered state or whatever it is because we don't allow ourselves to feel that emotion. So the 6 steps 3-step breath process teaches you how to process that in as little as 90 seconds so that you don't have to carry that baggage with you. Because yes, it's great to do big breathwork journeys or a Bufo ceremony or plant medicine, however that looks, plant and earth medicines or psychedelic therapy. Those are those big times. But if we're not going to find ways to actually address things as they come up, then we're going to have to continuously go back to have those massive, massive breakthrough experiences, which is why I'm so passionate about integration and learning not how to necessarily manage things as they come up, but actually process them. Because management is more like compartmentalization, so you can get through it, but you're not actually unpacking what it is that you compartmentalized.
Yeah. Yeah, and processing the things that come up in the moment is so helpful, so we don't have to carry around that energy with us. I know Peter Levine, really the creator of somatic experiencing, he's famous for educating people about how animals, when they are in a situation, when a gazelle is being chased by a lion, right? Their body's getting pumped with all the cortisol and the adrenaline, and they're running, and then maybe they escape from the lion, and then what do they do to regulate themselves? They shake, right? And then animals shake, and then they shake it off, and then they go back, and it's almost as if they were never chased by a lion before. So that's the way animals sort of regulate their nervous system. And for us as humans, we can't be like in our office at work one day and then just start shaking because we're upset over something. But we can breathe, right? We can always take some time out and take some breaths.
Yeah, basically what happens there is from a young age, if we have a tantrum or we're expressing ourselves and we're told that we're being too much, so we shut down, and that starts the process of dissociation. So many of us are just not even aware that we're disconnected from feeling. So to your point, it's not even like that we need to shake it off. It's just that we need to allow ourselves to feel it. And that's where a lot of times it's like, man, this is uncomfortable. And it's like, heck yeah, that's great. Get excited that it's uncomfortable because that means that you're moving through it.
Right. Yeah, one of my old teachers used to say, revel in the awkward phase. That when we feel awkward and when we're like in the middle of this, like that's when we're growing, that's when we're learning, that's when we're actually doing our work. Um, that question I want to wait till after the break because we just got a couple of minutes before the break. So, with what you're engaged in now, you're really focusing on integration. It sounds like education a lot.
Yes.
Um, I'm wondering, how do you feel about sort of what's been happening in the psychedelic plant medicine world in general? Most people know MAPS had this application for clinical trials with the FDA. It got rejected, and now they're probably going to have to sell MAPS to somebody in order to raise money to be able to go through the clinical trials again. I know psilocybin and LSD. There are companies that are in clinical trials for those. How do you feel like what's happening in I guess, the psychedelic medical application of all this stuff?
Yeah, I think that's something that's going to take it longer than 60 seconds to unpack. But, I think there's a lot of things to be hopeful for, and a lot of people that would have never been exposed, interested in psychedelics are starting to say yes to it. And it's just so amazing. Like I have a nonprofit that supports first responders with healing from PTSD. And I'm starting to hear from them how they're having these different medicine type ceremonies. And one of them sent me a podcast from a former firefighter that started her own nonprofit that takes firefighters to, I think she takes them to Mexico for ayahuasca ceremonies. And they're talking about Bufo and all these things. And I mean, yeah, in my lens of the world, things are expanding and opening up. That's what I'm experiencing in my lens of reality.
Gotcha. Yeah. I would agree with that, and we'll see what the future will bring. But it seems like we're heading to a world where working with plant medicines, working with these powerful substances is going to become more and more accepted. All right, Sam, we're going to take our last break of the show. And when we come back, I just want to kind of go over, we've talked a lot about integration. We haven't talked too much about preparation. So I'd like to sort of take the step back and go through the arch of preparation, experience, and integration. And maybe we can give our audience some tools for that aspect. Okay?
Cool.
So everyone, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We've been speaking this hour with Sam Kabert, and we'll be right back to tie it all up in just a moment.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
All right. So Sam, I want to just take a step back for a moment to look at sort of this overall process of integrating our spiritual awakenings, whether it's through plant medicine or other practices that normally we tend to think of like there's sort of this preparation phase, there's the actual experience, and then there's the integration of that phase. And so we've talked a lot about the experience and the integration, but what about the preparation? What do you recommend for people to how to prepare before they go to engage in these kinds of experiences?
Yeah, I wrote a book about this. There's always a book, right?
Right.
This one's called Psychedelic Compass, and it's a workbook with like covers all that these questions and it's got journaling prompts and things like that. But to say it just like high level, recap it for me, it's about being called. You know, if we're thinking about going to psychedelics and medicine, and we're approaching it like we would a vacation, like rolling up our sleeves and that masculine doing energy, then it's probably not the right time. The caveat for that is like if things are hitting the fan and it's really like you really need it and you've done your due diligence and you're approaching it in that masculine energy, then absolutely by all means. But generally speaking, if we're just like, you know, I'm not really sure if this is right for me or whatever, just like put the intention out there. And if it comes, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't, right? But there are other things that you can do, you know, as powerful as earth and plant medicines are, they're not necessarily the answer, right? Because we can't just keep going back to these medicines for the answer. We have to learn how to integrate for ourselves. And I was having this conversation with someone 2 days ago. She reached out to me from a podcast she heard me on or something, and she hasn't had experience with psychedelics or any of that. And I started to ask her questions about like, okay, what are you currently doing for your mental and emotional health? And asked her some basic things, including like the subconscious mind. And, you know, there are some cases where someone's got no experience with even smoking weed, let alone psychedelics, or they're not even doing the work, and they go straight to the top with Bufo, and it works out really well for them. There's also other cases where it doesn't work out with for them, and then they go through a dark night of the soul because they're not prepared for it. But then there's the spiritual side that, hey, all is perfect and happening exactly how is meant to, right? Because they're learning a lesson when they finally do, because they always come around, in my experience of seeing them. So there's a lot to be said on this topic, but in terms of like if psychedelics are right for you, or if something's feeling off, my simple solution is not just like learning to regulate your nervous system and learning about the subconscious mind, but the philosophy and practice of soul life balance as opposed to work life balance. Because work life balance is double yang. And to understand this, the yin yang or yang, the yang energy is about doing. It's about responsibilities and obligations in the outer world. So work-life balance is double yang energy. Soul life balance prioritizes the yin energy first and foremost, being like what's going on in your inner world with your mental and emotional health, and then your connection to something greater than this human experience. And when you adopt that type of philosophy, things will shift for you. The last thing I'll say about that is like, you look at the programming of work-life balance. The work-life balance, there's a W in work and an L in life. Typically in phrases like this, the letter closer to the A would be first, so it would be life work balance. And if work-life balance was actually serving us, we would call it life work balance, because the whole purpose of work-life balance is to prioritize things in your quote unquote life over work. So why are we saying work-life balance? Well, we're saying, oh, hey, like you probably should, but like subconsciously, I'm going to speak to your subconscious mind, let you know you should always prioritize work over your life. So for all those reasons, I would say to practice and sit with this philosophy of soul life balance to see if it resonates with you.
Yeah. I see how, your background of sort of coming from this entrepreneurial, very masculine, go, 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 do kind of stuff, how it's really sort of done a 180 for you, and that now you really have learned to like be more in sort of the more feminine sort of receiving and being and focusing on like what's really serving me in the moment, and not what do I got to do, what do I have to achieve. And indeed, it seems like in the world in general, there is a little bit of this kind of battle between the masculine and feminine. They talk about, the patriarchy, and now is the rise of the matriarchy, yet still that there's a very strong grip that the patriarchy has on the world. And I'm just curious from more of a spiritual perspective, how do you see what's happening? Like, do you have a way of sort of viewing the world that gets it to make sense for you personally?
Do I have a way of viewing the world to make sense of for me personally? Yes, I focus things that are in my direct awareness. I don't watch the news. I don't get caught up in other people's agendas. I just heard, I was at a workshop yesterday, and I loved this. Someone brought in Mel Robbins' new book and her new philosophy of let them. And, I haven't really engaged with her new book or much of it, but I've seen her do some social media posts about her philosophy of let them, and I'm like, absolutely, like that's the mindset I've had these last several years of people are going to do what they're going to do, and if that triggers something in me, then as opposed to look at them, and this is just a worldview, right? I'm talking about like individual relationships, but it also goes to the worldview, like of what's happening in the world politically or anything else, being like, what is coming up in me? If there's a trigger in me, then it's not about what's happening out there. It's about what's happening inside of me. And that's where I can do the deeper work. Because I hear from people all the time, like, that are doing the work, right? Quote unquote work. They're like, oh, I want to get into shadow work now. And I'm like, oh, that's cute. You think you're not doing shadow work now by doing the work? Because shadow work is just the deeper layers, right? Anytime we're going to not look at that thing coming up, we're no longer doing the shadow work. So just by quote unquote doing the work, that is the same thing as doing shadow work. The only time you're not doing shadow work is when you're numbing, avoiding, distracting yourself, or blaming something outside of you versus looking at what it's bringing up within you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm really glad you brought that up, because I don't know. I've always kind of had a hard time with just the term shadow work because I kind of feel like it separates this aspect of ourselves when it's really something that's a part of us. And like you say, it's like if we're doing our work, shadow is a part of that. And yeah, it's when we avoid that we're not doing the work, but it's not doing the shadow work, it's just not doing the work, period. So it's a more holistic view of things. So I really appreciate that. Sam, unfortunately, I could talk to you for hours. Unfortunately, we do have a limited amount of time. So if people want to learn more about you, learn about your work, your book, where do they find more information?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is samkabert.com. That's SAMKAB as in boy, ERT, samkabert.com. And if you go to samkabert.com/club, that will take you to the Breath Club, my free online community where you can learn everything you need to know about the subconscious mind and how to regulate your nervous system.
Wonderful, wonderful. Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to come on my show this week. I really appreciate it. Any last words for our audience before we sign off?
No, thank you so much, Sam. Yeah, that's it. I had another rant come through. I'm like, that's going to take too long. So thanks so much. I appreciate you having me on the show.
No problem, no problem. And I'm sure you'll be writing more books in the future. We'll bring you back on when you come out with your next book.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Awesome. So thank you. And of course, thank you, my loyal listeners, for tuning in each week. Without you, there is no show. And don't forget, if you did miss any part of today's show, you can always catch the replay on talkradio.nyc on all the major podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and across all the social media platforms, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Thank you all for tuning in. Take care. We will talk to you all next week.